Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Small Business Month webinar at Fiverr. My name is Liz Decio. I'm Fiverr Community Manager, and I'm really pleased to introduce our webinar specialist today and host, Ken Cervera. He'll
Hello.
be teaching us how to validate our business ideas. Ken is the founder of Own Your Truth Creative and the host of Own Your Truth podcast. He'll be sharing the importance of believing in your small business ideas and also how he's used Fiverr to make these ideas a reality. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ken.
Yes, thank you so much, Liz, Michelle, Andy, Kendall, all the wonderful people at Fiverr and Social Live for this incredible opportunity. Yeah, I'm just gonna dive right in and really, I'm not gonna talk too much about myself. I just want to get to the value part. um, what's really interesting about this presentation is I put a lot of thought into how to deliver the most value, especially when you're at that inception point of an idea. And something that came to mind for me immediately was some of the hard-won lessons that I experienced as an entrepreneur starting a small business that's very much tied to the digital creative economy. And what I realized was that as Fiverr, in terms of my experience, I am both a seller and a buyer on the Fiverr platform. And what's been really great about that for me is the ability to live on both sides of the value exchange actually helped me validate my ideas even more. So we're going to dive into all that detail. And something I would want to dive into with you in the beginning stages of this is validating your ideas is where everything begins. And I always like to tell my clients and people who I'm sort of coaching through this journey, is before you strategize your marketing, create your logo, or write a business plan, there's one vital step you need to complete first. Validate your idea today first. And it starts with the hypothesis. And I think the journey of this idea validation, it begins with a simple framework, which is I believe that XYZ, this business idea that I have, will be valuable and profitable, whether it's a product or service. That's really where it starts. Then you have to find out, which means create an MVP, minimum viable product, and find every conceivable way to prove yourself wrong. Um, Remember, this is the first part, and it's the most difficult because we have inherent biases that we have. Our ego gets in the way, right? We want to make sure that we can prove ourselves wrong, that our idea is valuable, that we can make money. So we're looking for ways to prove that. What I've found to be really helpful is how do we prove ourselves wrong throughout this journey so we can deliberately look for all the blind spots that we're not seeing. Um, Also, how are we going to measure what we've learned until we reach the following conclusion? Also, just a reminder to everyone to make sure you scan the QR code to ask questions that we'll get to at the end of the presentation. So the way I like to present is the gold is going to happen at the end. I leave a lot of time for us to dive into the Q&A. So just make sure you scan that so we can get started. Um, so I apologize if I can't answer your questions right away. We'll save it to the end. Um, the following conclusion is, should I pivot or should I persevere? So this is a framework that I didn't create. It's the Lean Startup Methodology, which is a book by Eric Ries. Highly recommend it. Also, I received no money to promote said book. Want you to know that. Um, we want to use the feedback loop of build, measure, learn. So the framework is remember the guesswork. This will help you to save time, money, and energy, and also build the framework for your unique engine of growth. Every engine of growth for every business is different, but we're going to dive into this in greater detail. So, again, the question is, should I pivot or persevere? This is where it gets personal for me. I started a podcast years ago, and my hypothesis was I wanted to provide value by diving into the stories beneath the story that people weren't talking about. Some of these were entrepreneurs, they were founders, CEOs, artists, creatives, even interviewed a Navy SEAL, that basically peak performers and leaders in their field. And I wanted to spend 3 years with this podcast focusing on one objective, just master the art of interviewing. That's it. So initially, I wasn't focused on the money. I wanted to really focus on the process of interviewing and really fostering the safe environment where I could connect with my ideal client and someone who just has an interesting story too. This evolved into the evolution of Own Your Truth Creative. So I'll tell you how this story driven approach helped inform the growth of my business and then how Fiverr helped to amplify everything. Like there's a really fun story here that I'm going to share and I'm going to just dive right into it. So, what was my idea? My idea was to highlight the individuals who've embraced the dark lessons of life and use those difficult moments as fuel for growth and success. For me, that's what I find fascinating. And my hypothesis that was driving this idea was people are going to freaking love listening to how artists, entrepreneurs, creators, leaders, and survivors overcame the most challenging aspects of their lives and careers. My minimum viable product was I'm going to deliver a bi monthly podcast that provides unique tools and inspirational insights to help purpose driven humans stay focused on what matters most. And I was going to measure downloads, listener engagement, guest feedback, and outreach from potential guests. Before I dive into the next slide, what was interesting about this is I was working full time in mental health and being a husband and being a father and producing a podcast. So my original goal of a bi-monthly podcast was unsustainable, but we'll dive into how that actually helped me refine my idea as I discovered that. Um, I discovered it was time to pivot. I haven't stopped the podcast, but what I did was pivot away from my original intention of the bi-monthly production schedule. But here's what I learned, right? It was a freemium, basically inspiration platform, right? I wasn't making any money off the podcast, so therefore I couldn't put any more time into it than I already was. But what I learned was that I got to 10K plus downloads, not too shabby. 500 inquiries from publicists and booking agencies. And by the way, I didn't have a huge following on social media. And some of the people that were reaching out to me were publicists or booking agencies for podcasts with clients who were New York Times bestsellers. So I was doing something right. And it didn't matter that I didn't have a huge following or that I wasn't a micro influencer. Something was working. I got a lot of emails from listeners saying I'd made an impact in their life. This isn't me trying to brag or promote my own product, by the way. This is just the truth. It's I was getting real time feedback from the audience. The interviews were fantastic. They were valuable, but each episode was taking 12 hours to edit due to my perfectionism. And if I look at what I wanted to make for an hour of my time, the podcast was actually costing me a lot of money, and I was losing revenue because I wasn't making any during that time. It also wasn't profitable. So what I did was completely revamp the format. And I was like, how do I reduce costs, save time, but still provide more value per guest? And what I realized is by switching from bi-monthly to just focusing on one quality interview per month, I could then cross promote that value add to potential guests saying, hey, you're going to get a month of uninterrupted airtime on my podcast. Let's have a great chat. If you're ready to be vulnerable and real with me, let's dive into this. Um, what I ultimately discovered by deciding to pivot, I was validating every single lesson that was sort of highlighting my value exchange, meaning the guests were providing invaluable insights into the unique problems of my core customer segment, right? I was interviewing wellness entrepreneurs, founders, creatives across different industries, and I was getting to find out what are the unique problems that the majority of them struggle with. Also, the conversations I was having on and off microphone were getting to the heart of each guest's mission and vision. This is what really helped me open up and frame and create a framework for the core brand messaging and strategy that I use with Own Your Truth Creative. Also, the platform. I could use this platform of the Own Your Truth podcast to amplify all of my marketing efforts and provide a seamless entry point into the premium paid services. And we'll talk about the question that really ignited the next phase of innovation and growth, which is because the podcast wasn't a revenue generator for me, I had to ask myself while I was validating this idea, what does the premium slash profitable version of the Own Your Truth experience look like as a whole? And how can I accelerate that delivery into the marketplace? So that ultimately became Own Your Truth Creative. Now, the idea validation that happened here is really where things started to take off because my idea was to provide high level brand strategy that was driven by story. And what if I could house that with business consulting all under one roof? Prior to me starting the podcast, I've had a lot of experience working with small businesses from the ground up and helping to put everything into place from the pricing structure to personnel, how to outsource, and all that kind of fun stuff. And I knew that I had some strengths there that I could leverage. So my hypothesis was that businesses, founders, and entrepreneurs, they need someone who can streamline the process of creating the core content and strategy that they need to launch their vision. So, how do I use my skill set as an interviewer to accelerate the journey? So, my MVP was a 30-minute creative consult, which was free. And then my lead magnet became a free brand strategy checklist to immediately identify blind spots. So, this way the customer could get something valuable at no cost or time to me. I just had to create it once. Then that would help me accelerate their onboarding process once they filled out this checklist for me. What I measured was revenue per project, profit per month, and the customer acquisition cost and the time I spent on each project. And it led me to this outcome, which is I needed to persevere, right? I realized that by leveraging my interview skill set as a premium service and providing a suite of creative services around that under one roof, I could keep my customer acquisition costs down. So most of the traffic and revenue I was generating came from word of mouth, listeners, guests, and direct marketing efforts via email. So the podcast had literally become a freemium engine of growth to help me establish credibility. And also the profit per month and revenue per project were both consistent. The only problem was the time per project was variable, but it was manageable based on the scope of the project. So I had evidence to support growth. The value proposition was unique and attractive to buyers because they knew when I sat down to interview with them, I was going to get everything I needed to create the brand strategy and messaging for their businesses. So as I moved through this, what I discovered was human connection, questions, and prioritizing face to face customer interactions were not only valuable, but they're sort of hedging the bets against the wave of AI innovation that's taking place right now, which is how do I make myself uniquely AI proof for now until the technology develops? And what are those things that my customers need the most of now that they're theoretically going to need more of in the future? Um, Time variation. I was determined to find a better way to streamline every project to accelerate and improve the customer journey. So what I discovered was, let's say if I got a creative contract for $2,000, that's a pretty decent amount of money for one work deliverable. But the problem was, the bigger the price tag was, the longer it would take to bring a project to its completion. So it's really looking for ways to hone in on that sort of mid-range offering that I could complete quickly and do a lot of volume with. Webinars, we're on one right now. I've used this format thanks to Fiverr and really some of the inspirational things I've learned along the way working with Fiverr customers, is that creating a niche creative experience allowed me to answer multiple clients' questions at once. So, for example, all my business consulting clients, I have a time every month that I would see them, and we'd get through all the barriers, roadblocks, boundaries all at once so that I could accelerate them through their journey. And this is where I was leveraging the network effects to provide value, where the people that showed up on the webinar were asking questions, I was answering, and with every question that was asked, I was taking a note in terms of a product or service I could then deliver based on a specific customer need. And that is really the key to validating any kind of idea is there a need? Um, Now it was time to amplify what I had learned and searched for so many different ways to really refine and amplify my service offerings on a larger scale. So before I dive into this Fiverr love letter, please know I have not received any funds or incentives to promote Fiverr. I just love the platform. It's really worked well for me. And here's why. This is just the honest truth. I needed a way to refine my service offerings, right? So writing mission and vision statements, for example, was a huge way for me to be at the inception point of innovation for all of my clients. And my hypothesis was that if I could, offer a gig that would create the perfect mission and vision statement, I could connect with new buyers really at that point of innovation where they didn't have a clear path forward. So I could create a seamless path to customize orders, add-ons, and additional revenue based on the human interaction component. So my MVP, my minimum viable product was a free 30-minute creative consult to align expectations. Then I would also provide free unlimited revisions until the content was perfect, delivers smiles and goosebumps. So that was my MVP, that was my customer promise. And what I measured was feedback and demand, the average sale price, conversions, and revenue per month. And this is what I discovered. I needed to persevere and really make the Fiverr platform and that experience a part of a couple of the additional revenue streams because I learned that after joining that it helped me to transform my approach to content creation and really, really streamline the path of customer engagement and also time management, right? I learned flat out on the Fiverr platform, there were certain jobs that I don't want to do that take too much time, and they're not keeping it within that profitable scope of me holding a standard for myself. So, for example, my goal at the time was to make a minimum of $100 per hour. But if I charge 150 for a 5 hour project and think I'm closing in on like 30 bucks per hour if I spend 5 hours working on that project. I think I've done my math right. Anyway, if I haven't, I apologize. I also realized with Fiverr, I was having interactions with global buyers. This was huge because it expanded my economic insight beyond LA and New York, which at the time was where the majority of my clients were coming from with Own Your Truth Creative. And that was where most of my listenership was with the podcast. I was also using customer feedback as the only lens of innovation for my service offerings. This was a huge deal. I'll explain more about this in detail. Also, the conversions and revenue per month were consistent and sustainable. And what I discovered was instead of having 5 different gigs, I started with 3, then ultimately pared it down to 2. And this is where I'll sort of dive into this story about the 3 hour rule. So Fiverr really helped me to honestly get laser focused on the only content that matters. And what I realized was this 3 hour rule of mine, which I'll dive into deeper maybe in another webinar, is I love creating content. However, what I discovered was that I only have maybe 3 hours per day of high level creative thought energy to give to any given project. Once it goes to like 4 or 5 hours, I can still be creative and still be productive. However, the quality of work and focus and attention I could deliver it was sort of like the law of diminishing returns. I was going into the well too often and it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't profitable. So the question that changed everything that Fiverr really helped me to amplify was how do I make those 3 hours of creative thought energy so valuable and so impactful that I can build my business around that. And if I followed that rule, I could reach the 6 figure level on Fiverr by really, really honing in my service offerings and continuing to validate my idea. So again, Fiverr helped me simplify the approach of value creation and communication. It also helped me to create a unique competitive advantage. And this is what it looked like. Validated learning and innovation, marketing strategy, huge. Fiverr, fist bump. Like by asking buyers why they clicked on my gig, I was able to optimize my marketing efforts and the Fiverr profile to attract my core customers. Um, I'm going to tell the story, pardon the typo, about the webinar, the custom order conversion. So I hosted a webinar for Fiverr, I think it was 3 months ago, and someone attended that webinar who was a seller on the Fiverr platform. After attending that webinar, they reached out to me, and this is one of the orders on the side here, and said, "Ken, I saw your webinar that you launched on how to optimize your profile. Can you optimize my profile?" And I said, "Sure, man, I got that. Let me send you a custom order." After seeing that webinar, the idea for the product was delivered and given to me by a customer who saw the value that I was providing in advance. He asked me for a specific product. And I tell that story because that's sort of the peak expression of validating idea and idea one customer at a time is don't create something you think will be successful. Find out if it can be successful by providing 80% of the value that you want to provide by creating that thing, then seeing if your core customers are going to bite and reach out to you and say, I want that thing. Then go ahead and create it. That was not a glamorous description by any chance, but hopefully you understand where I'm getting at. Also, I learned the top 4 deliverables after 100 orders. Collecting feedback and analyzing the metrics, I realized I only needed to focus on creating mission and vision statements. Why? Because that's the guiding lens of any organization. It's what you do, why you do it, and the impact you're going to have in your customers' lives by doing it. And the value proposition was a huge get. You can literally put that on the main page of your website or landing page and have that be the main sales marketing language that drives conversions. Brand narratives humanize your brand, and really share a bit more of the story that went into why you created your business. So I built my offerings on Fiverr around these deliverables, and then let's get to the conversations equals conversions rules. Several buyers told me in real time, in many different ways, the same thing. The main reason they chose me was because you made the Fiverr meetup mandatory, and I got a sense that you actually cared and weren't just in a rush to take my money. So I'm flat out giving away some of my competitive advantage. If you're not making the Fiverr meetup a mandatory part of your creative process, it doesn't matter what you do, no matter what your service or product, you're losing out and you're missing a huge competitive advantage and a way to distinguish yourself from the competition, but also provide a premium service for your customers. I learned so much from the conversations that it helped me only customize the stuff that I knew was going to be profitable. So my average order at the time when I started Fiverr was $70. Now it's up to 180 is the average, but the majority of them are looking like the 300 plus per order. And by the way, it's only taking me about an hour and a half of my time to consistently deliver on that value promise. So again, I'm not boasting, I'm just keeping it real with you. Here's the deal. Validating your idea is going to take some time and effort and patience, but it's all about getting curious about what you don't know and finding out what your customers need. If you're not doing that, you're really going to risk spending a lot of time, money, and energy. Don't do it. Save your time and energy. It's precious. I like to say time is our only non renewable resource. So when you're a freelancer on any platform, we'll talk about what the barrier of entry looks like and how you can really use that to your advantage. So this is something, again, take a screenshot of this, save it, use it on whatever you need to. If you want to write your own value proposition, this is how you do it. Inherent strengths plus value equals paid. First paragraph, what's the problem you're inspired and determined to solve? If you can't say that in 30 seconds, you got to refine that before you move on to the second paragraph. How will you apply and leverage your strengths, skills, and experience to solve it? Third, what are the top three most valuable ways you will make an impact? Fourth, tell your customers how you will transform their lives once they commit to working with you. By the way, this structure, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can take, copy, and paste onto the primary gig offering on Fiverr and literally use this format. You can go on mine, see how I wrote it out. Just copy, paste it, use it. This is how you create your own value proposition. Also, validating idea, the core of this is really you want to use that structure of build, measure, learn. Find out who your peeps are, right? Who are your core customers? Are they wellness entrepreneurs? Are they executives in the import export business? Are they digital creatives? Are they authors? Are they hip hop artists? That, for example, is the customer segment of all these people on the screen. They are live and active, current, some of them longtime clients. Some of them I did brand strategy for. What I was discovering was there was a specific age demographic of my core customer, and they tended to work across the board, either in tech, design, or in some kind of creative capacity, whether it was arts, written, spoken, hip hop, you name it. So what I did was build a business around these people and a custom value proposition that was designed only to attract your core peeps. Um, this brings me to the rapid fire tips and insight section of the presentation. These are the ideas that I learned the hard way. Um, Ask yourself if your customers actually care about your service slash product and why, right? For example, right, I'm a content creator. I host a podcast. I've been doing brand narrative videos. But at the end of the day, do people care about what I'm delivering? And if not, I have to have the courage to pivot to meet them at that specific product market fit or need and deliver on the value and only the value they need. So I have to put my ego aside and say, even though I think my offerings are dope, no one may care, and it may not be a profitable path forward. Also, sometimes the grand idea is the smaller part of the big picture. So, for example, if I wanted to go all in on monetizing my podcast, I really have been resistant to that idea because even though sponsorship, and I've had, by the way, opportunities to sponsor and to become a monetized podcast, but I didn't want to flood or distort or distract the core messaging that I was offering. I don't like people listening. I don't like listening to commercials when I hear a podcast. I just want to use the podcast as a freemium engine of growth. The premium can look different. Some ideas that are real actionable strategies for you, right? Let's say you're about to jump on the Fiverr platform or you've got a small business. Before you want to maybe offer something different or make a pivot, start a Facebook group to gauge the interest first. Maybe it's a Facebook group around a specific topic or need that your potential customers have expressed. Also, interview 50 potential customers to collect feedback. If you're launching a business around doggy treats and how to train reactive dogs, right? One of my clients has a really successful business that's built around those two service offerings. Interview potential people before you launch your next meetup or group or product. See what they need, get curious. Also, join a workshop or webinar, right? This may seem like shameless self promotion. It's not. I have literally had a lot of people sign up for, this webinar. And the reason is it was a pre-existing network that existed. Fiverr's been so great about doing all the marketing and promotion for me. I just posted on social media, but the benefit of that and the value is that now at the Q&A section, right, I'm going to get live feedback from all of you, and I'm going to learn a lot of stuff about what are the barriers to entry, what are the questions you have about your idea validations, and then I can take this knowledge, build a product around it, and deliver it where I don't really have to do a one-on-one consult anymore. I can just create the product you need, let you grow, and then offer my services as a premium after. Um, Huge thing, offer your service and provide value first as the entry point into premium services. People need to know what they're buying, right? HBO, let's take any business, especially in media. Why do people sign up for HBO? Because they get 30 days free, and it's hard to leave HBO after you've seen The Sopranos and Game of Thrones, right? We won't talk about the later episodes, but that's the thing, right? Let your clients and core customers understand what you do and then provide on that value promise. Whew, I'm gonna sip some tea, take a sip back, and just thank everybody. I believe we can, add the questions into the chat. Thank you for the reminder to, to say that earlier, Liz. Um, yeah, I'm here to answer all the questions. And honestly, before I open up the mic, the reason I'm offering a complete Fiverr profile optimization course is because I learned after doing all these webinars, this is the thing that people need to know, right? They've asked for it. I'm already doing it. So now I can build a massive product around it. So this, even though it's right here at the end of the presentation, it's another prime example about how I'm validating ideas and the products that I've used to create using the customer feedback as my lens of innovation. So if you have questions that I don't answer today, feel free to sign up for the brand strategy checklist for free on my website, or just email me if you want the course. But let's dive into the Q&A. Um, how am I doing, guys? Okay, so far? Sweet. Um, Question from Michelle. Michelle, I'm going to try to pronounce your last name. I please apologize if I destroy it. Uh, Bell, let's just say Michelle. I don't want to ruin your last name. Question: was there ever a time when you were working full time and also building your own business? Whew. Yes. Uh, Here's the truth. At the time I launched the podcast, I was working full time in integrative mental health. And when you're doing a clinical sort of casework basis where you have clinical hours every week, the full-time job was tough, right? It's not an easy field to be in, but it was very rewarding, right? It still is. I still work actually part-time at the clinic. So I was doing that while launching a podcast. My son was just born. My wife and I were trying to find the balance, trying to make all this work, and it was stressful. It was really hard, and there were moments where I did want to give up. And quite honestly, I'm glad that I didn't. So yes, to answer your question, I was working full-time and building a business, and what I realized was that if this is sort of getting to the heart of your question, if you have an idea that you're doing while you're working full time, it's going to help you leverage your schedule more effectively, right? What I was learning was that I only have a certain amount of hours per day to accomplish the objectives and build some momentum for my business life while trying to be present as a parent and a partner. So I have spent a lot of time in that journey. So we can follow up and please feel free to email me, Michelle, if I can be of any support in terms of like how to manage your time. I am a massive productivity geek. So I have all the systems, especially Fiverr's really helped me refine how to optimize my workload. So feel free to email me, Michelle, later. Um, also, let's see. There we go. All right, question two. I'm starting a virtual home staging business in Portugal. I'm just starting and trying to improve my cold call and client communication skills. Do you have advice for a 20-year-old entrepreneur? Oh, this gets to my heart. Michelle, thank you for clarifying the questions. Um, yes. So, 20 years old, get curious about what your strengths are, right? Be honest with yourself. Entrepreneurship is hard. Um, and the cold calling is difficult, right? It's very draining, but it will help you optimize your communication skills, right? I think learning to sell, hands down, you can talk to anyone in any field or business. That is the single most valuable skill that you can develop as an entrepreneur. So I did cold calling at one point in my life, and it was awful. It was miserable, but it was a gut check. It helped me refine my sales approach and realizing it wasn't really about selling anything. It's about getting curious about how you can provide value. So if I can give you any advice, learn to manage your time. Be honest with yourself about what you can realistically accomplish as a 20-year-old, if you're in school and have a part-time job, and then look for opportunities to refine the ability to identify your core customer need. And that really is part of the sales process. So again, joining webinars to see how people who are a little bit in front of you or in front of you in terms of your journey, that's a huge way to do it. Learn from other people who are where you want to be, ask them questions. Also, ask people to be a mentor. Ask them out to coffee. People you respect, maybe in your community, someone online. You'd be amazed by seeing someone up on Instagram that you respect and honor and say, hey, I would love to just pick your brain about this. That is literally how I built my podcast, is by reaching out to complete strangers whose stories inspired me. So if you're a 20-year-old or a young entrepreneur and you want to grow, talk to more people who are in front of you. You will learn so much. And that's something you can't learn in any business school because it comes from experience and very specific niche information. Question three, every new business experiences common challenges like lack of funding, balancing growth and quality, and time management issues. Ooh, how are you navigating these challenges in the past? Yes, lack of funding. Even though I had a full-time job at the time, right? We have a mortgage, we have a kid, we have expenses and things, and I like to go on staycations. I wanted to really refine a system for myself that would allow me to build a business with the time that I had and really get focused on managing my time to do that. So, to getting over the challenge of lack of funding, here's some things you can do right away is if you don't have money, what you do have, chances are, is time. So ask yourself, what can I provide for free that would allow me an opportunity to have a real engagement with a customer? Then by providing value, I can ask them, what else do you need? Right? So for me, for example, when I started building my consultancy business, it was through calendar scheduling software. I was offering free consults. I keep an average now on my schedule 6 hours per month of pro bono time where I can just talk to people one on one, especially new entrepreneurs who are really purpose driven. Um, I love it. That's something that I recommend is just provide value for free to get over that funding leap. I could talk more about that in detail, maybe in a separate chat, but because I want to get through the questions, balancing growth and quality and time management. There's a great quote, I think, by Warren Buffett, which is make a list of the top 10 things you want to do with your life and business before you die. Take off seven, focus on only the top three. And I would even go deeper and I would say for now, if you're starting a business, what's the one thing that you can provide that ideally may be like a digital product or service that is just about you providing value and then building a product around that. That's how I actually saved on a lot of time and cost was that narrative, provide value, build, measure, learn. Um, and then it helped me manage my time. For example, the 3 hour rule was huge. I knew that if I could only do 3 hours of high level creative content and brand strategy, I had to batch the rest of my day in alignment so that I wasn't jumping back and forth between content creation, consulting, and webinars in the same block. So, for example, if I get off this webinar, right, what I've blocked in terms of my time management schedule is I'm not going into another consultation. I'm going to do an hour of content creation. And then after that, I may close it out with a different task where it's strategy and planning. This may sound corny, but the term context switching means you're switching between my version is consulting, content creation, back to consulting, back to cooking dinner for my son, and then doing some content creation. Like jumping back and forth between tasks was draining so much of my time and energy. So, one tip that I recommend is see if you can give your weeks a theme. Monday for me is prep strategy. I call it the sharpen the scalpel day, where you dive into what do I have coming up? What are the actionable strategies I need to deploy to get it done? Then Tuesday is just pure content creation, human connection. Wednesday is Wellness Wednesday. I could go through sort of how I batch my week, but batching your time is huge. And I'd be happy to dive into that with you more one on one. Question number 4. Thank you, Michelle, for fielding the questions. What advice would you give someone who is just starting out in their own small business? Whew, don't worry. First, remember, fear is good. And what I mean by that is, I know I just said don't worry. Don't worry about being afraid, is the point I'm trying to make, right? If you're starting a small business, you're going to have a lot of doubt. You're going to have a lot of naysayers. Some of them may be your best and closest friends. Some of them may be your family members, right? So the one thing I would say without a doubt is be selective with who you share your ideas with and ask yourself who in your network is in front of you. So if you're just starting out with your own small business, you can certainly get support from a lot of different resources and people, but I would say choose people who are selectively and statistically in your life known to be supportive, to be mentors and champions, and maybe even a few people in front of you whose opinions you really respect. And this could even include reaching out to someone online, a mentor, an influencer, a business figure of some kind, and asking for help and support. Be selective with who you share your ideas with, because what you're going to realize when you start out in small business, you're going to launch, you're going to grow, you're going to fail, you're going to lose money, you're going to make money, and then as you figure out this balance, as you up level your business, you will start to understand that your circle will by default, in terms of your circle and friends and influence, it's going to shift and change. So, um, thank you guys. These are really great questions. Um, let's see. Let's go. All right. Kamal, LinkedIn. Kamal, thank you for your patience. Um, what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out? Oh, gotcha. I think I already answered that one. Thank you, Kamal. Um, how does one question is how does someone decide a timeline or small milestones for oneself to make sure we are on track and to avoid spending too much time over something that might not bear fruits? I could geek out on this question for at least another hour. This is amazing. All right, timeline wise. So, what I do is every Sunday or Saturday, end of week, when I'm done with the work, right? I sit down for 15 minutes and I plan, I call them my high level tasks that I want to create. I spend fit or want to accomplish, and I spend 15 minutes of time deliberately trying to figure out whether or not the tasks that I'm going to do are going to be fruitful for me. So, a way to easily segment that list in my mind is one, if I accomplish this task, is it going to expand my network somehow? Will I be able to provide value for someone who can then tell another person about it and encourage them to talk to me? Another one is it a money making thing like sending an invoice, billing for a job, getting back to a customer? Is it going to move the needle of my goals? And a lot of the way I define this is one, if I'm worried or maybe a little bit nervous about accomplishing the task because it's pushing me outside of my comfort zone, that's something worth spending time on because you're going to learn and it may get you one step closer to opening up a revenue stream you didn't see. So if I'm a little nervous to reach out just to one person or accomplish this task, that's a good sign. So use fear as a guide. Also, Ask yourself if you could only accomplish one thing this week, what would that thing be and why? Is it making you money, expanding your network? Are you learning something from it? So those are some of the qualifiers that I actually write down on paper. And that's kind of a good framework that I've used. But again, I will dive into this with you one on one if you'd like. Um, let's see. Another question. Thank you, Michelle. How do you get stronger when your sales strategy doesn't work? Ooh, yes. All right. So let's say you've got an existing business, you've got clients, you've proven that there's evidence for growth. If the sales strategy isn't working, or if you're not getting in conversions or feedback, something that I would consider is one, do a pool of your existing clients and customers and ask them flat out, what do you need? What are some of your biggest barriers, problems, and how can I fix them? So if you have a network of people that you can tap into to get that information, hands down, do that first. Then again, it goes back to sort of the build, measure, learn framework is get curious about what you don't know, right? Because what worked in the past may not work in the future. For example, everything I've been doing on Fiverr, building my whole business around mission and vision statements and custom orders and really figuring out what my clients want. For all I know, in maybe 3 months or less, AI is going to take over it all, right? Maybe mission and vision statements won't be a valuable commodity anymore. Maybe it's going to be systematized. Maybe it's going to be automated. So I think what you can do in terms of a sales strategy, if I don't know how big your business is ask yourself, what are the skills, the value that I can deliver, or the problems I can solve that are uniquely AI proof? I like to look at that from the lens of like, what is it that you can always do that is essentially AI, recession, depression, disaster proof? And what can you do to build a business around that thing, whether it's a core strength, need, or problem? Um, that's the way I would drive the sales strategy. Again, my sales strategy, I don't do any marketing. I need to at some point on Instagram or Facebook. I don't pay for any of that stuff. I use captive audiences and human connection to define and find out what those problems are, and then I just go and build a product around that. So if you want to refine your sales strategy, one final thing, ask yourself, how can you create or get access to a captive audience and provide value? Ask them what they need and build a product around it. Um, how we doing on time, guys? Okay, thumbs up. Anything broken? So far, so good. Cool. Um, Thank you, Andy, for fielding the question from Fatma on LinkedIn. Hello, Fatma. If we're experienced, but we find ourselves unemployed without resources, how can we start a project if we have ideas but no capital? Great question. This will sound weird, but look at the lack of funding as an opportunity, right? So if you can build, measure, learn your way into either a core product or service, that's the key, right? I had a great chat. I think she was the former creative officer at Google, and she said constraints breed innovation. I think that's the truest thing I've ever heard about business, which is if you have constraints of money, it's going to help you really leverage your time to go and get money. Even with me having a full-time job at the time, which is a huge advantage, and very understanding in terms of what that. I'm blessed to have that opportunity. I use the constraints of time or money to leverage the time I would spend building my project, right? The podcast wasn't making me money. So what did I do? If I had this idea to start without any capital, what could I do? I could offer a free consult where I could provide value and let those prospective customers either convert into paying customers and then refer someone else that could be another customer. So I used the time I had to solve problems for people, took that knowledge back to refine a core product, and then would launch things that I knew would have an existing audience for it. Um, Again, I hope that answers at least some of your question, but let's talk in person because that's a great one I want to dive deeper into. From May on LinkedIn, what are some strategies to finding clients on Fiverr? Whew, great question. So, when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. I was frustrated. I was like, this isn't for me. I can't figure this out. Um, what really helped me was I got really honest with myself about where my strengths were first, and I knew it was content creation and business consulting and creating story-driven content and frameworks and bigger strategies. So what I did was I had the idea, mission and vision statements were going to be the key MVP, the core product, right? Then I went on Fiverr. I looked at people who were Fiverr pros and crushing it with at least 50 plus five-star reviews and a consistent narrative from their customers about why their services were so unique. And when I got started on Fiverr, again, I'm sure the strategy will change and evolve as the platform continues to grow. But at the time, my competitor or my avatar, I looked at their pricing for a mission and vision statement, and it was $80. So what I did to immediately grow on Fiverr was ask myself, what can I remove and add to that value? And well, what can I do to reduce the price while simultaneously providing more value? So I looked at the top dog avatar, right? Top person, human, individual, um, five-star reviews, consistent revenue. And instead of offering $80 while I was competing with them at the same price point, I offered to do a mission and vision statement for 70. And when I looked on their specific gig descriptions, they were providing only one revision. So what did I do? Let me do unlimited. So if a customer is looking at those two offers side by side, even if I was new, they're going to see someone who is got a great price point and is providing more value. It puts me ahead in terms of a competitive advantage. And I've used that formula to grow consistently, on and on. So thank you. That was a great question. Um, David from YouTube. Hello, David. Um, yes, he says, fellow Fiverr seller in the writing category here. What impact has ChatGPT had on your business? David, awesome question. Man, I didn't know much about AI, and quite frankly, I still don't. But what I do is rely on people who are AI like gurus in my field of clients and in my network, and I asked them what the future looks like. While I was doing that research, what I was trying to do, and this sounds crazy, I was trying to put myself out of business by using Chat GPT. So now what I mean by that is, again, when clients on Fiverr were coming to me, and this specifically is the kind of impact that Chat GPT has had on my business, what I was doing was always the formula didn't change. I was creating content for me. In other words, I didn't go on Chat GPT if they want a mission vision statement and say, "Hey, Chat GPT, write me a mission vision statement." I wasn't doing that. What I was doing was looking at ways to accelerate my own customer journey. So, for example, I would create original content as a writer, creator on Fiverr, and I would deliver it to the customer. They would say, Ken, this is great. Can you rework this and just make it flow a little better? I would take specific paragraphs and instead of just brainstorming fresh and just sort of getting the creative gears going, I would copy and select a specific paragraph, put it in Chat GPT and say, punch this up, right? And then what would come back from the bot would maybe be one word that I can use. So maybe it would be like hidden gems. I would take that word and say, "Ooh, I like that." And then I would go back and phrase a new sentence around that word, that little nugget of inspiration that ChatGPT inspired. So I kept it all creative. That's always my customer's promise. And what I realized was I would use ChatGPT as a way, again, to accelerate my process, but I would never use it as a substitute to like take over because humanizing AI content and keeping it authentic and creative is the jam. Like I would tell clients, no artificial flavoring or intelligence was used in the creation of your content. That's like my one-liner. And it's been a really fun way to like understand from clients that's a unique value proposition because it's driven by story and human connection. So, but that's a great question. Thank you. Um, Infinite Universe on YouTube. And guys, you have about 5 minutes left before we sort of close out the questioning. Hope I'm not babbling on too much. Hi, Ken. Time management is key. Can you share your strategies about this important subject? Oh, man. I'll try not to get emotional, but I don't know, like 10 years working in integrative mental health and being a parent and being a partner and building a business, being an entrepreneur, it's isolating, right? It's lonely. It can be exhausting. What I realized after I burned out twice, and that was just god awful, was like you want to avoid productivity shame, right? So we all have these grand ideas. I'm going to finish this project by 2. I'm going to do this by 3 and then 4. I'm going to finish these 3 things, and if they don't get done, I suck at life. That was my narrative. I was like, I have to get this done. But what I realized is that I learned to manage my time by reframing the task. So for example, right, the creating the slides for this webinar, I knew it was going to take me 5 hours. So what I did was map out my week, and I would say on my little journal here, I write down the top 3 things of the day, and I would say spend 1 hour creating the Fiverr webinar. That's it. Because I could control the time I put in to the creation of that. If I had rephrased the question as complete Fiverr webinar, I could have spent 8 hours, not completed the webinar, but felt like a failure. So I think the big thing is frame your important to-dos within the reality of the time you've got. So over a couple weeks, I would complete 1 hour and 1 hour and 1 hour. The project got done. I only put on my to-do list finalize Fiverr webinar after I gotten the last version done and finished up the rest for delivery. So it's all how you frame it. Basically, to nutshell it, don't put the words finish, complete, or do on your to-do list unless you absolutely have to get that thing done on that date, or if there's someone else in your team waiting to get it done. Another part of time management was I had to let go of control, meaning I needed to hire a virtual assistant and I needed to offload some of the tasks that were really not the high level stuff per se, but were equally important to keep moving my business forward. And that was a struggle for me. It took me 10 years to realize I can't grow without a virtual assistant. So, luckily enough, I interviewed someone on my podcast who owns a virtual assistant agency. She found me an amazing person, and my business has been changed drastically because I was able to really focus on the top 20% of the things that were going to grow 80% of my business. So, all right, we got time for one more question, and then I'll make the big announcement at the end. Um, thank you guys. Um, let's see. Ooh, yes. Infinite Universe, do you have any tips to choose the right Fiverr freelancers for my jobs? This is great. I'm a buyer on Fiverr. I love it. Fiverr's been very, very good to me. Um, the way to really use that as a buyer and really identify the best Fiverr freelancers for jobs, the first big check mark, right, is see if they're offering a time to connect, to talk about the work. If they're not, at least in my experience, it's not providing me with the confidence I need to believe that if they can't give me 15 minutes of their time now to at least talk and strategize the way forward, that is a work ethic thing that will become an issue later on in the process when I may need to get on the phone with them. So one, see if they're reachable and able to do a free consult. Two, look specifically at the 5-star reviews that they're getting. What are their clients saying about them? And get curious about what are the industries that those reviews are being written from, and how consistently does that Fiverr freelancer work with those kinds of people? So if one of the clients I work for is a music producer, right? If I want him to produce music, I'm going to go look up reviews for people that have come to him for music production, right? Not necessarily logo design. So make sure there's obviously alignment with the work, but the quality of 5-star reviews and ease of communication are the two big things to look for. Um, Final question from Tita on YouTube. What are some of the strategies to stay motivated when you don't have many clients? Oh, yes. First, remember that everything in business at some point will be an evolution, it'll be seasonal. Hang in there. If you don't have clients or many clients, don't get discouraged. Get curious about why and how you can solve potential problems for the clients you don't have. So a lot of what I do is think about ways to not just compete with people. I'm constantly asking, how do I make my competitors relevant? And this sort of maybe goes into some of the blue ocean strategy in business where what are the things that only you can deliver that you are world class in? And if I look at this from the lens of my podcast, I knew I didn't want to be a world class podcast editor. So I'm going to offload that to someone else. So the reason I say this, I'll try to sum it up and cap it up so I can make the big announcement. Um, Don't worry if you don't have a lot of clients yet. See how you can provide value, offer services for join webinars, Facebook groups, provide value in private Facebook groups that are in subjects that you're interested in. See if you can build a network and a following, and then you can grow a business off of that. That's how a lot of businesses actually started. Um, Guys, we have about, I think, 5 minutes left. Was there any other announcements I needed to make, Liz? No? We're good? All right, awesome. I'll use the last 4 minutes to talk about how I grew my podcast. I grew it purely word of mouth, and this is a specific question from the Google form. And guys, remember, just a quick before we close it up, the recording will be on YouTube once you sign off. So check it out. I encourage you to go through all the slides, copy, paste, steal, whatever. Use it. Let me know how I can help. It will be available on YouTube after we sign off. Um, and really quickly, the podcast grew purely through word of mouth and me focusing solely on creating a container of vulnerability where I really wanted to dive into the research and find out the story beneath the story for people. And the way the podcast grew was that every client, sometimes the podcast grew, by the way, from someone I worked with on Fiverr. I would get to know about their business and say, "Do you want to be on my podcast? This is great." Other ways it grew were people that I had worked with in the past, were current clients. There were people who I connected with on Instagram, where I would look at one of their videos and be like, "They are aligned, right? They struggled, they're vulnerable on a social media platform with me, and there's alignment with the podcast. Let me have them on." And then strategically, I would look at who was following them, and then say how much of their followers are in my core customer segment. Is there alignment there? So then that would make it a win-win-win situation. Once those people were on, the promotion cycle would start. I would then look for ways to say stuff like, "Hey, I already wrote your bio for your episode. Do you need a mission vision statement for your business?" So the podcast grew from that sort of freemium inspirational approach. I would reach out to people, ask questions, provide value, and yeah, I'd be happy to offline more if you guys want to reach out to me. So that's all I got. Thank you so much. I am so grateful for this opportunity. Again, thank you to Liz, to Andy, Kendall, Michelle, all the people at Fiverr and Social Live. I'm so honored to be here today and would happy to connect with you guys anytime. So feel free to reach out to me.